The dispossessed were getting a second chance to win their birthright. And a great adventure was to be had on the dusty roads and clattering boxcars of the land.
I covered myself with glory in the hobo camps.
Spend an hour by yourself on a riverbank and listen to it and see if you don't hear it say something to your soul.
It was the fall and rise of a nation, the Great Depression.
We knew there could be good times, but we were most impressed by the fact that there could be bad times.
It could happen again. And if you know what happened then, you'll be better prepared for what might happen tomorrow.
The top would make any difference to the man in the street. He wasn't looking toward the White House for relief from the Depression. He was probably headed west on a boxcar. Hard times had become the golden age of the American hobo. Westbound, the way of all great human migration.
We're reminded of Henry David Thoreau, one of his essays, Westering. He says that there's a kind of inevitable westward movement in American life, that America is looking west. We think back to Thomas Jefferson and notes on the present state of Virginia looking out to the continent, sending Lewis and Clark across the continent. I think there's a sense of destiny to that western movement, and the Depression accelerated, picked up on that, and made it really into one of the epics of migration in American history.
If you had some kind of a car and a few dollars for gas and repairs, this was the way west, Route 66. But if you really had nothing, you only had one choice, the abundant and free, though illegal, method of freight hopping. In the parlance of the time, you became a gentleman of the road.
And a lot of ladies can remember that. The older ladies will remember that. Gentleman of the road. I wish there was more of them today.
Hobos had been around since the Civil War. Back then they were called ho-boys, men who carried a hoe or shovel from town to town in search of farm work. The hobo population was a kind of economic indicator. Few in times of prosperity, they would increase during a crisis. During the Great Depression, it's believed that as many as 1.5 million hobos were riding the rails, among them men who showed signs of having fallen from high stations.
They had floor-shine shoes that was wearing out, and they had shiny pants that was wearing out, and they had nice white shirts, and they had nice jackets and vests, and a lot of them wore them on the road. And they were funny looking, and the other hobos would laugh at them.
These human scarecrows provided inspiration for a clown. Emmett Kelly became famous for his battered derby and shredded finery. Hobos became staples of Depression-era newsreels. Shots of crowded boxcars said a lot about hard times. More often, hobos were depicted as public nuisances, evicted by the police from their hobo jungles, turned back at the California line for vagrancy. These images left a great deal unsaid about what happens when a man becomes a hobo.
They joined a club, you might say, and they took an oath, Brotherhood of Bows.
Hobos had a culture and a code of honor that had been handed down for generations. To begin with, you weren't a bum. Bums begged. Hobos worked. To find work or a meal, you looked for distinctive signs left by other hobos. This sign meant kindly lady.
I had a lady say, 3 guys have been here already, I don't have anything to eat. I've got a loaf of bread, is all I got left. I said, well, bread would taste like cake. Could you give me a couple of slices of bread? Well, sure, I can give you that. And that bread tastes so good, it tasted like cake.
If you had a hobo's mark on your door, you would be assured of many interesting visitors.
Asking to sharpen our knives. And that now a person would think it was very weird if a stranger came and wanted all your table knives and so that they could sharpen them, but at that time it was perfectly customary.
Hobos were tolerant of most forms of eccentricity, but certain people were not welcome at the campfires. They were called yegs, escaped cons and other men who preyed on hobos.
In old days, you would hand these people a match and say, build your own fire. That meant you better get out.
Hobos knew trains like a lover knows his beloved. They preferred steam locomotives to the diesels that were starting to appear. Steam trains were prized for their beauty as well as their deliberate nature. They took a while to build up steam, so they were easier to hop. Some famous names were once proud to call themselves hobos. Robert Mitchum, Melvin Belli, James Michener. The famous author's final television interview was for this program. He reflected on his days as a hobo.
I covered myself with the glory in the hobo camps because I would be one of the youngest, but also one of the bravest.
The most difficult of hobo feats was called riding the rods. That is, riding the struts underneath the boxcar.
And the cinders are right there. I did it once to prove I could, and then I chickened out completely. Never again.
But once aboard a rolling boxcar, there were the innumerable epiphanies of the open road.
You have a sequence of epiphanies when things suddenly look clear.
What a wonderful experience it is to sleep on top of a mountain. What a wonderful experience it is to lay on and sleep on a river and look at the sky an hour before you go to sleep and see all the stars and dream about the day that you'd be among those stars.
There was a name for a hobo's heaven. It was called the Big Rock Candy Mountain.
In a big rock candy mountain, all the cops got wooden legs, and the bulldogs all got rubber teeth, and the hens lay soft-boiled eggs. All the farmers' trees are full of fruit, and the barns are full of hay. Oh, I'm bound to go where there ain't no snow, where the rain don't fall and the wind don't blow, and the big rock candy mountain.
The mythical Big Rock Candy Mountain where you have the lemonade springs, and you never find it. It's always over the next horizon, and you just keep going down the road. A hobo's road never ends.
This experience infected a few hobos with permanent wanderlust. They spent their days endlessly looping across the rail lines of the country, following the seasons and the crops, until they diminished and vanished like the steam trains themselves. But for all the other hobos of the 30s, there was the matter of a destination. Chances were that would be where the rails ended at the western shores, at the Big Rock Candy Mountain of the West, California.